these last several days have been so sad.
Really?
They have been so sad. First of all, the American airline that went down and the helicopter collision.
Yep.
That just hit me to the core.
Really?
It really, really troubled my soul. Was praying for those families of the folks that were in the helicopter, the folks that were on the aircraft. And it just hit me so hard. And then a couple days later, there was the little airplane with the little girl and her mom and the crew. So that was really tough. Then Friday, I showed up. I was supposed to have my massage therapy. And I've been doing this for like 4 years because, I have like low back issues and shoulder, all the things. And it's helped keep me mobile.
Sure. Yeah.
It's just been such a blessing. And so I show up, and I had been there New Year's Eve and was talking to my girl, Janet. Janet, well, are you going out tonight? Are you staying home? She's like, I don't know. I can't decide. I'm a last minute planner, she says. I'm not one to just make plans and keep, long term. And so she said, I may stay home, but I may go hook up with my friends. I just don't know. And I'm like, well, whatever you do, just be safe. And she's like, yeah, it's going to be a good year. I said, 2025,
Yep.
So I was telling her we were going to be with friends and family, and we were going to play games. And I even at Thanksgiving had said, hey, if you don't have anything to do, come on over because we'd love to have you, because she wasn't sure if she was going to go to her parents or not. Okay, so Friday I show up, and the door's locked, but they're all independent contractors who rent the rooms, right? So they're all licensed massage therapists, but they rent space.
Okay, sure.
So it's not unusual for the door to be locked. And I hit the little button, and my gal and another gal rent the same space, and they're on opposite schedules. And I look, and here comes Lisa, the other gal.
The other gal, okay.
And I'm like, oh, hey. I said, do you have the room this afternoon? And she goes, you're here for Janet. And I go, yeah, because I've known her about as long. And she goes, can I give you a hug and tell you something really sad? And I'm like,
oh, no.
What is happening right now? I said, yeah. And so she hugs me, and she said, Janet passed away.
Oh, my goodness.
Dude, I'm still in shock. Still in shock. 49 years old. Wow. I'm like, naturally, what in the world?
Right. That's young.
And she said, I don't know. They've ordered an autopsy, but that's all I know. And she said, I have just been giving all of her friends, and I know.
Wow. Yeah.
And I said, I can't even believe we're having this conversation right now. And all weekend long, I kept thinking, did I have that conversation with Lisa? Did she tell me my Janet is gone? And even today, I'm still thinking, Lord, was there a mistake?
Wow.
Like not his mistake.
Sure.
But that somebody got it wrong and she's going to show up.
Yeah.
She was out of town or something. And then if that wasn't enough, and that was enough.
That's a lot.
Oh, still. I'm watching CCM, Contemporary Christian Music. I'm watching all of these stations across the nation. Their teams are signing off because their stations were purchased by EMF, which is K-Love and Air One.
K-Love and Air One. Yep.
So you're watching all the Fish stations, Fish Atlanta, Fish Los Angeles.
Yep.
You're watching the Big Dog in Dallas, KLTY. Just all of these lots of stations sign off. And I appreciated hisair.net taking the time to gather all that audio and say KLTY signing off. Atlanta, Fish Atlanta signing off. And so I'm watching all these people, and I resonate so deeply with what they're going through right now. And so I just grieved all weekend, just a heaviness. And I know that we have I've never thought this was a privilege until like the last few years, but the privilege to grieve with one another.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
A good way to say that.
Well, it's so difficult.
Yeah.
And most of those hosts, like almost, I would say all of them, they don't know me. I don't really know them.
Yeah.
But I do know what they're going through.
Sure. Because it was not that many months ago that our radio show ended. And I, like you, was watching the social media feeds and the different things that were being, this team is saying goodbye for the last time. This, but
so
radio
hard.
personality, this is their goodbye on this radio station, and that brought up all sorts of different feelings and emotions than I expected it to. Like I thought, like, oh, well, in some ways, this is a sad day for contemporary Christian music radio because these stations that have been around for a long time, these personalities that listeners have grown to love, they're coming to an end in this way. But that happens in the industry.
Sure.
So I was expecting me to just kind of like, okay, well, that happened. And let's move on.
Did you listen to any of the?
I did.
Oh, you did? See, I didn't. All I could do was see so-and-so signed off, and I was like, okay, but I'm not going to listen because I can't.
Yeah. And listening to them say goodbye brought up all sorts of different feelings and emotions that I didn't expect to have.
Oh, do tell.
Because I've gone through that 2 times in my career. It feels weird to say career, but gone through that 2 times where a radio show I was doing was ended. And the first time I was given the opportunity to say goodbye.
Nice.
And, it's still hard.
Oh,
but at least you've had the opportunity to work through all sorts of different feelings and emotions. And so when that day finally comes, you're able to say goodbye to listeners, even, days before it happens, you begin to talk about it a little bit, and they have the opportunity for those who desire to do so, to say goodbye to you.
Yeah.
And you have the opportunity to say goodbye to them. And there's an element of closure.
Oh, sure.
Still sadness.
Yes.
If that was something you really enjoyed doing. But at least there's the opportunity to express appreciation, to say thank you. Many of those listeners, had been listening for a long time, encouraging, commenting. Many of them reached out, as you would share your life and talk about how I'm praying for you, for your family, for these different things. And so having that opportunity to say goodbye was really good. This last time the radio show ended, there was no opportunity to say goodbye.
Nope, not so much.
And one of the lines that I heard management throw around at one point in time is like, well, we don't do that in the industry. That doesn't happen. And as I'm listening to all of these other radio stations,
what industry?
All these other Christian radio stations say goodbye to their listeners. Listeners say goodbye to these air personalities. The air personalities having the opportunity to encourage listeners to walk with Jesus, to say, if you didn't take anything else from what we've done, the fun, the games, the silliness, the whatever, I hope that maybe you've had some encouragement in your walk with the Lord, that we've been able to encourage you in that way. And if God has taught you anything, shown you anything, encouraged you to do anything through this radio show, I want to encourage you to do that, to be obedient to Him and keep walking with Him. And so I just found it really interesting to realize, man, I don't know what it's been, 5 months later, or whatever it is, like,
I'd have to count on my fingers.
But to have to, in a sense, lament the fact that we didn't have the opportunity to say goodbye again.
Yeah.
I know we both went through some of that right out of the gate. But
I was going to ask you.
It came up again.
Because your circumstances were a little different when that day happened for us. You already had vacation scheduled.
Right.
You moved into that. You were helping another station with one of their fundraisers. You had some distractions for a couple of weeks.
I did.
Did you process any of that then about not being able to say goodbye to the folks that had walked with us for so many years?
A little bit.
Okay.
But as you said, I had a lot of distraction.
You did.
And so there was a lot going on. We had family coming to visit. We had these things. And so it wasn't until a little bit later that I'm like, oh yeah, that I missed that opportunity to do that. So this, and maybe this is why it came up now, is because...
Of course, because you got to hear them say.
I got to hear that and realize I didn't get to say that this time.
Was there something remarkable about how these teams signed off, or was it pretty, I don't want to say standard because all of it's heartfelt, so there's nothing standard about it. Was there something similar with all the goodbyes that you did listen to when you were listening to?
I think the two things that stood out to me the most were the gratitude that they seem to express to the listeners for letting us be in each other's lives for as long as we have. All the support, all the times that listeners would, show up at events and encourage them and do this and just, interact on social media or email or whatever, and just sounds kind of cheesy Christian phrase, but to kind of do life together. And even though you don't develop maybe a depth of personal relationship because you don't see each other all the time, there is an element of relationship that is built. The listeners, I know, feel like they know the people that they listen to every day on the radio. And for those listeners who do reach out and engage in dialogue and go back and forth, that very often ends up being reciprocated.
Of course.
Right. And so there is just this relationship that can be built. And so every personality that I heard, and I didn't hear all of them, but many of them, expressed the gratitude for the time that they had with the listeners, the time that they had at that station, sharing favorite memories, sharing experiences that they had there, some of the highlights over their time at that station. And some of them had been there for decades and had a lot to look back on and reflect on and share. And the other just very often was almost a preaching to themselves as they're talking to the listener as well, of saying, this didn't catch God by surprise.
Right.
It may have caught us by surprise, but it didn't catch him by surprise. And he is sovereign, all this. And, I don't know what's next, but he does. And so just wait and see. And for many of the personalities, they had the opportunity to say, here's how we can stay connected. Here's, my personal way that you can follow. And if we pop up somewhere else down the road, this is how you can know. And, and just, really the reminder of the sovereignty of God through that. Yeah.
What a beautiful gift they were given. And not only the announcers, the hosts, but the listeners.
Even the listeners, yeah.
That was the most grievous thing to me about not being able to say goodbye, was not being able to say to the listeners the same that these dear comrades, these dear folks have been able to say, thanks for the journey. Thanks for, reminding me that he is Lord. And hopefully we've been able to do the same, those kinds of messages and to have the opportunity to stay in touch. If there's a way, hey, this is how you can connect with us on social media, or here's the email address, or
here's our Instagram handles, or here's our whatever. Yeah.
And when you don't have that opportunity for closure, and nothing, for no bad reason.
Right.
I think that's the other thing that was a little disturbing to me, was so many listeners were asking, hey, where'd y'all go? What happened? I had a couple of people go, What'd you do? I'm like, yeah, you'd think that. And yet that's where the lack of communication to our listeners was grievous to me. Just grievous. You can't just take brothers and sisters, and we're not the only two. There were two other lives involved too. You can't just take brothers and sisters and go, there was nothing that you did, but we're not going to say that out loud. We're just going to let people draw their own conclusions.
That's just it. It allows people to write their own narrative.
What? Why? Why would you do that to somebody that you just called a brother and a sister a week before? How could, I don't know. It does. I say that and I go, Steve, if I think about things and how I've treated others from time to time, so it's not that I am without fault. You will never hear me say that. You will never hear me say I get this right 100% of the time. I'll just say, again, that having had that opportunity when I left a radio station prior and was able for kind of a week, but certainly the last day I was on the air, to say thank you. And my boss standing right there, was in the studio with me and had made the trip even, because didn't live in town. To be there, say, okay, let's go get coffee. Let's, pray. Let's continue to lift up our listeners, and knowing that the Lord had somebody to take that show and continue to love well and steward well, and that he had another path for me in that season. But just to say thank you. And man, yeah, this stinks. I said I left a job I love to go to a job I love, and then I left the job I love to come back to a job I love. That was kind of the journey for me. But the family of listeners was always the most important part as we talked about what the Lord was doing in our lives. Because, how many conversations have we said that walking in a broken world, which kind of says it all, but walking in a broken world with one another and trying to keep our eyes on the Lord Jesus and not on others for the validation of who we are in Christ, that's a full-time job. You can only walk by the Spirit to keep your eyes on Him.
Yeah.
Because Don Ray's not going to do it.
Oh, left to myself, I'm not going to do it either. But there is something about walking in community with other fellow believers that is hugely important. And, I feel like that's one of those lessons that God continues to teach me. I've been a Christian for a long time now. Almost 40 years. Something like that.
Time.
So he still is continuing to remind me of that, teach me that, and just, say it is important that you develop relationships with other brothers and sisters that you can process these things with, remind each other of truth, pray for each other, as you said, even lament together.
Oh, yeah.
And be able to remind each other that, whatever we're walking through, the highs, the lows, the good, the bad, we can do that together with our eyes fixed on Him.
Yeah. And as these new folks that walk into either unemployment or whatever they're facing right now, coming out of the Christian radio space, like our hearts are with you. And you're going to feel that for a minute because you miss the connection with your listeners. And if you don't bridge that and have another way to communicate, like all of a sudden the storyline of so-and-so's life is gone. Like, well, what happened to your son? And is your daughter okay now? And did so-and-so end up getting married? And how is the
grandbabies or this or that or whatever.
And even deeper things than that we had the privilege to know. So we know, and we grieve with you. Yeah. We grieve with you, and we are praying for you. And we do know that it didn't take the Lord by surprise.
No. Well, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I hope that you'll spend a little time. Check out the website. It's DonandStevePlus.com. Like and subscribe on whatever platform you happen to connect with us on, whether it's audio or video. You can even check out Raphael's Roastery, Raphael'sCoffee.com. We run on Raphael's and are grateful for their support. But thanks for being a part of Don and Steve Plus today.